let's talk about Progression Through Unlearning. Now, this is a classic album, in my opinion. I want to ask your perception of it too, but Daryl, do you know that the drum sound on this album is famous to many people? Does Tim know that too?
We do. To a point where it's almost like a little bit annoying, but and the drum sound is actually a little bit annoying too, but we owe that a little bit to Helmet, a little bit to like what we wanted to do, and then a lot of it to Steve Evans at Tracks East. He cranked the snare drum. He was like, no, I'm going to tune this even higher. I want this thing to cut right through everything.
Do you regret that decision, or are you okay with it?
No, I don't regret it. I mean, that album sounds the way it's supposed to sound.
Yes, I agree with you. I absolutely love it.
We were sick of our record sounding kind of flat and dull. Live, we were a very energetic, bright band. And we came and Steve said, what do you guys want to sound like on this album? And we said, we want to sound more like our live show. We want this. And so he pushed the tempo. He pushed the sounds. He pushed my voice more than it had ever been pushed before, which, was not easy for any of us. But Steve Evans is a huge, huge part of that album and where Snapcase went from that point on.
The intro drum fill on Caboose is famous as well. I'd say it's right up there with the Quicksand drum intro for...
Phaser, right?
For Phaser, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know, but you asked my perception of Progression Through Unlearning, and it's tough to have perspective on your own band when you're really close to it. But now that it's so far away, and all of our records are kind of old at this point, I can go back and listen to our records, and I understand that Progression is by far the best of all of our records. I understand why it's unique. I understand why it's, in a lot of ways, the most popular one. I don't understand why some people really hang on to Looking Glass Self over Progression. But Progression Through Unlearning was really like a snapshot of a band fully dedicated to their craft at that point in time. Designs for Automotion came out after that. And that sounds to me like a compromised version of Progression Through Unlearning, to be quite honest.
Did you compromise? Before the album was recorded and released, did everyone get together and say, like, all right, we're taking this thing to the next level. Let's draw this back. Let's try this different thing?
Somewhat, yes. Yeah, I would say we did. And we were becoming a regular on the Warped Tour. And, on the Warped Tour, at that time, it wasn't so much about hardcore. It was just about, like, moving the crowd, and being a crowd pleaser. And, I regret that heavily.
Do you like anything about Designs for Automotion? Is there parts of it you like? Because...
Oh, no, I do. I definitely like some of those songs. And the songs that I like, I really do like.
Yeah, I think that album has some of your best songs. And I remember a lot of hype leading up to the release of that record. That was a big record. I remember anticipating that coming out and a lot of talk about it. Did you feel that too?
I do. And I remember some close friends in the Buffalo scene saying, oh man, you guys screwed up. This record's just not as heavy. People wanted you guys to sound heavy, and I was like, I don't really care, but in hindsight, I kind of wish it was heavier, and I wish we'd, hadn't kind of like compromised some of that heaviness. What I am upset about is like, I feel like we put together a great record with End Transmission, and like at that point, a lot of people kind of fell off and didn't care about us anymore. And in Europe, the record was really well received, and actually our shows were getting bigger. But in the States, it was just like, it was a steady decline at that point.
Well, you have to take chances. And a lot of bands, that was the thing at the time, was taking a chance and trying something different. And you're on this locomotive that's gaining a lot of traction. You're on these big tours. You're playing with these big bands. I don't know. I think you have to try something different.
Yeah. And so right around 2000, 2001, 2002, this is, to me, like the bands that I was starting to really love were like Refuse, At the Drive-In, the Blood Brothers. Like these were groups to me were really kind of like interesting.
Yep.
And they were heavy, but to me, I thought like this is where hardcore is going. But I was completely wrong. Hardcore was sort of regressing because Hatebreed blew up. And nothing against Hatebreed. I mean, that's a fantastic album. And those guys were, again, super hard workers. And they earned everything they got. But like, I was wrong. The scene wanted more moshcore. We had been friends with Toby from H2O for a long time, and he's a great guy, and they're all super cool guys. But they got signed or got new management, and they shared management with Face to Face. We ended up on the tour, but we didn't share the same management. So we felt like as this tour was progressing, we were not getting treated the same way. And we just felt like every time we showed up at the club, like no one would talk to us. They were just rude to us. There's never space on stage for our gear. We didn't have anywhere to set up our merch. It was like everything you could think of. Like any way you could slight a band would happen on that tour. And we got to Phoenix, Arizona, and they said, "No, you guys can't play." And we're like, "Well, we're here." They're like, "No, you're not playing." And so all these hardcore kids at the show in Phoenix were like, "Hey, there's a kind of like a local hardcore show going on down the street at a Chinese restaurant. Do you guys want to play that?" And we're like, "Really?" So we literally drove this big tour bus and parked in front of the Chinese restaurant where the local show was going on. And we played on top of the tables that they put together at the Chinese restaurant. And all these kids left the face-to-face show to go. And it was like one of the sickest hardcore shows. People stage diving off of like the countertops and stuff like that. And it was wild. It was just like a blast. And that really pissed them off. And the next show, they said, "You guys are off the tour." And I remember we drove to San Diego for that show. And we drove home from San Diego to Buffalo.